Hello, I'm Chris Palmer and I play second bassoon with Symphony Nova Scotia. I'm giving this little video presentation for our upcoming concert, Holly conducts Shostakovich. We will be performing three works: Firebreak by Juliet Palmer, the Classical Symphony by Prokofiev, and the second Violin Concerto by Shostakovich. Now, since this presentation is being recorded in advance, we have not yet started rehearsing this program, and I have not had any opportunity to hear the first work, Firebreak, so I'm not able to comment on it. However, I will say that Juliet Palmer, who as far as I know is not related to me, was born and raised in New Zealand, and she now lives in Toronto. Her piece was composed and had its first performance 2 years ago. I encourage you to read her program notes on the work, which are very interesting. I look forward to being part of bringing her creation to life again on the Rebecca Cohn's stage. I do have plenty to say, however, about the other two composers in this program, both of whom I have admired and performed for many years. Prokofiev and Shostakovich were the two titans of Russian music during the days of the Soviet Union. The third Soviet giant was Khachaturian, but he was Armenian, not Russian. I will mention the other two great Russian composers of the 20th century, Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff, but they had both left their homeland before the Russian Revolution, so they were not part of the Soviet scene. Now, Prokofiev and Shostakovich had lots in common. They both showed great musical talent at an early age, and each, in his turn, was enrolled at the St. Petersburg Conservatory at age 13, Prokofiev first, being 14 years older. They were both brilliant pianists, and as composers they both achieved international recognition at a young age. Sergei Prokofiev in his youth was known to be somewhat of a rebel, and a lot of his early music shows him to be a bad boy. For instance, there's a distinct brashness and cockiness, as well as brilliance, in his first two piano concertos, which were written in his early 20s. It's as if he's an angry young man saying to the world, "This is what I do, like it or lump it." But he wasn't always like that. By the time he composed his classical symphony in his late 20s, he had got over most of his mischievous tendencies. He had the idea of writing a symphony, which is his first, modeled on Haydn. So it follows the traditional 18th century form and is scored for a Haydn-sized orchestra, which is the size of our core orchestra. However, it is boldly original, and there is not one bar that could have been written by anyone but Prokofiev. Interestingly, this piece predated by a few years the neoclassical works of Stravinsky and other composers who hearken back to early music forms and idioms in a modernist language. It seems that Prokofiev had already beaten them to it. But the Haydn form is not the only classical feature of this symphony. It also captures 18th century elegance and poise, which I will talk about. The first movement is fast and vivacious. I remember one conductor we worked with, Victor Yampolsky, and he said that the opening of the first movement should be like a cork popping out of a bottle of champagne. That image is always stuck in my head, and every time I hear it, I see that cork. All the contents bubbling out exuberantly. Also in the first movement, there's a second theme, which is on the first violins, and they have this big octave leap, or 2-octave leap. Bum, bum, boyom, bum. I can't do it at their range, of course, but they have to go from the highest string to the lowest string in one leap. And so while they're doing that, while their bows are moving like that, their heads go down with it. So, bum, bum, boyom, bum, 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 boyom. And you'll see all 8 heads just moving in synchronized perfectly with each other. It's always I always get a bit of a chuckle watching that. Yeah, the third movement, which Haydn would have made a minuet and trio, is, in this case, a gavotte. A gavotte is a Baroque-style dance which is very elegant and typically has 2 short pickup beats and a strong downbeat. Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 like that. Bach wrote a gavotte, for instance, which goes bum, bum, ba, da, 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 dum, ba, da, 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 bum, bum, ba, da, 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 dum. But in Prokofiev's case, he goes ba, da, da, dum, bum, 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 ba, dum, ba, 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 bum, bum, ba. But in Prokofiev, he does these harmonic twists and turns in every bar, so it keeps going in different directions, which is very un-18th century. It's a very 20th century thing and very Prokofiev. But so it has all the 18th century elegance, but a musical language of closer to our time. The last movement is very fast and lively, like a Haydn finale. It's very virtuosic. It's particularly demanding on the strings, but our string players, I'm glad to say, are more than up to the challenge. They'll nail it. All in all, this early 20th century homage to the past is very happy, charming, and melodic. I expect it'll put a smile on your face. Having said that, be prepared for a big change of mood in the third work on the program, the second violin concerto by Dmitri Shostakovich. Shostakovich is known to be the secret chronicler of life in the Soviet Union, especially during the Stalin era. He expressed in music what no one dared to express, even privately in words. Soviet audiences related well to his music. His experience was their experience, and they understood. He lived and worked under the watchful and suspicious eyes of the Soviet dictatorship, who sometimes publicly praised his works and at other times denounced them. He walked a fine line and was never sure if or when the axe might fall on him and his family. I'd like to quote the words of a British writer on 20th century music, Norman Lebrecht. He wrote this about Shostakovich. Not since Mahler was the public and the personal so literally related in music, nor was any music weighted with such irony to express and address social issues. Shostakovich chose these methods in order to preserve his inner freedom from the instruments of state terror. No composer is ever created under greater personal risk. Fearing for his survival, Shostakovich devised a code that the public understood and the commissars could not fault. He, above all artists, bore witness of the evils of totalitarianism. End of quote. So you can imagine how much stress Shostakovich lived under, and it shows in his music. His second violin concerto has all the hallmarks of his art: the fear, the tension, the protest, the loneliness, and the defiance. They are all there. While there are moments of great beauty, the prevailing mood is not optimistic. However, one doesn't come away feeling depressed or discouraged by it. Quite the opposite. We're drawn into his world. We're captivated and fascinated by it. We feel of his sadness. We're roused at his anger. We chuckle at his dark, sardonic humor. And we admire his defiant spirit and his sheer boldness. It is a terrifying but thrilling journey, and we somehow feel that we have endured his ordeals with him and survived, and that's a good feeling. As I mentioned, Soviet audiences related well to his music in his time. They knew what it was all about, but it resonates with us as well today. Even if we have never lived under totalitarian rule, his story seems just as real to us. And it's just like reading a novel by Pasternak or Solzhenitsyn, or Orwell for that matter. In this concerto, the soloist is the protagonist in a drama pitted against dark forces all around. However, there are sympathetic voices, and those are heard as beautiful expressive solos from wind instruments, most notably the horn and the bassoon. So, come and hear the joy of Prokofiev and the courageous honesty of Shostakovich. Our music director, Holly Mathieson, will conduct, and the soloist will be the brilliant Finnish violinist Elina Vähälä, if I pronounce her name correctly. We'd like to thank Women for Music for their support of this concert. Thank you for watching.